Of course, all of us sitting in here know that that's just totally ineffective. The only thing that fear may do, is to get us here in the first place. And it may be enough to get us to look to see what we have to do to get sober. It may be enough to get us to stay around long enough to see other people in recovery and to see that they have what we want and to make us willing to go to any lengths to get it. Maybe. In every other aspect of fear, fear is our enemy. It is our only enemy. Fear is the worm in our brain, the cancer in our brain. Fear hides out. Fear is like the shipworms that tear the hull of a ship apart internally. You don't even know that they're there until all of a sudden the ship begins to break up and fall apart. They're like the termites in the foundations of a house that have eaten it away, and one day it begins to collapse and you didn't even know they were there. That's fear. Fear warps and perverts our souls. Fear takes all of the starch out of our willpower. Fear makes a mockery out of us. Fear takes our natural God-given instincts and turns them into insanity. Fear is that force which creates in us what we call defects of character. The big book calls it an evil and corroding force that the fabric of our lives is shot through. The evil and corroding thread runs through our entire lives. And when you're working with your sponsees, keep uppermost in your mind the fact that fear is their enemy, and your job is to show them how to deal with fear. That ultimately the answer to fear is faith. Ultimately, in order for us to recover, we must acquire a certain amount of faith in a higher power. It is our faith which eventually is the turning point in our recovery. Because without the faith that God can do for us what we can't do for ourselves, we never recover. It's really quite simple. That's the truth of it. Now let's take a look at at Jim here. We're not going to read about him except at the end of his story. Most of you know the story, but let's repeat it quickly. Jim inherited an automobile agency. He was doing very well, had a wife, family, nice home, plenty of money. Jim was a drunk, and he drank himself right out of his automobile agency. Eventually he sold it to somebody, and at one point when he got sober, he went back to work for the same man who bought his agency. He went back to work as a salesman. He wasn't very happy about this, but this was what he knew. It was the business he knew, and he could make a living doing it. He had gotten together with the boys who were sober then in AA, and they had told him about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they had told him how they got sober and how they stayed sober. They told him about the spiritual way of life, that it was necessary for him to begin to live, and he rejected all of these things, believing that he could definitely do all of this on his own. One day Jim went out to see a client out in the country, stopped for lunch, the place he'd eaten lunch often. And let's see what happened on page 36. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. Suddenly the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart, but felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here, listen to this now, here was the threat of commitment. Threat, of course, equals fear, doesn't it? The threat of commitment, the threat of the loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. So he had all these things in mind. That is, they were all there if he knew that they were true, and he had the fear of these things, and yet he had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic. Yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else? Now you can see where this is heading too. Not only are we learning that fear won't keep us sober, and self-knowledge won't keep us sober, but now we're also getting directly into the province of the second step, aren't we? That God could restore us to sanity. What do you mean? And I'm not insane. Restore me to sanity? Nothing wrong with me, I just drink too much. And so this story of Jim and the story of Fred are designed to provide us with graphic illustrations of the insanity of the next drink. Yes?
Yeah, one of, I guess, feeling I have about this story is, it seems like there's still more going on. There's something behind the story. It's like, it seems very kind of weird that the book never makes mention to the fact about what was going on with this thinking. Like, why would he go to a bar that he drank at over and over when he's newly sober and just sit there and order lunch? It seems like he makes it so innocent.
Wait a minute, wait, that's a good point, but let's go back. We didn't read that part. It's here. Go back to page 36, let's find out. On the way I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I would get a sandwich. Also I had the notion that I might find a customer or a car at this place, which was familiar, for I've been going to it for years. I had eaten there many times during the months I was sober. So he wasn't deliberately putting himself in the place of danger. He was doing something which had been quite common with him.
Oh, familiar. I see familiar for the car thing. I thought he meant familiar for when he was going out drinking and he got sober and then went back there again.
Right.
I see.
Now, one of the things, of course, that we learn, and we'll learn when we get up talking about the 7th chapter, is that once being spiritually fit, he could go there any time he wanted to. He had a good reason for being there. If he went there for lunch or he thought he might find a customer and he's spiritually fit, it wouldn't bother him a bit. So we have to be real careful about thinking that the reason this guy drank is because he was in a place where there was booze. Because that's just not true. He drank because he's an alcoholic and because he was not spiritually fit. And he refused to do those things which had been shown him to do, that the others had done in order to recover. And so he was hanging out there, twisting slowly in the wind. He had no protection. He was powerless over alcohol, and when it hit him, and he had no way to go. And his mind automatically twisted around to an insane idea, knowing that he could not drink, he knew that, He knew what was going to happen if he did, but his mind said, oh, you can get away with it. It's like the guy who's driving home from work. He's got his paycheck. It's a Friday afternoon. He's got a choice. I can either turn left and go home, or I can turn right and go to the bar or the dope man. And he gets to that crossroads, and his mind says to him, oh, you can get away with it. Right to the bar, right to the dope man. And afterwards you ask him what happened. He says, well, I don't know, but I just, my mind said, it's okay, you can do it, you can get away with it. And I never gave it another thought. Knowing, absolutely knowing that that was not true. That it could not be true. Because his history proved it over and over and over again. All of our histories prove it over and over and over again. We can't get away with this stuff. And yet our mind will tell us that we can. All right, now then, let's go down to the second full paragraph, third full paragraph on page 37. Oh, I'm sorry. No, we need to look at the second full paragraph first. Page 37. You may think this an extreme case. To us it is not far-fetched, for this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We've sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, but there was always the curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. Next day we would ask ourselves in all honestness and sincerity, how could it have happened? Again, the message is clear. We're dealing here with an insanity. And the second step goes directly to that question of being restored to sanity. If you have a sponsee who is questioning the second step, so what does this mean, this insanity? I'm not insane. This is where the lessons are learned, right here in this chapter. In some circumstances, we've gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. But even in this type of beginning, we are obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened. We now see that when we began to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences might be. This lesson is over and over and over again. Our minds do not work right. We are in the grip of a terrible illness. There are some theories that we actually are on a suicide mission. That somehow or another we really want to kill ourselves. I don't know that that's true or not. Sometimes it seems like it. Now then, on page 37, at the bottom of the page, that last partial paragraph, this is an allegory, the allegory of the jaywalker, and it is designed for us to identify ourselves with this fictitious character so that we can see just exactly what has happened to us over the years. Our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him, and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently he is hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he's decided to stop jaywalking for good, but in a few weeks he breaks both legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work, his wife gets a divorce, and he's held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. The day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? Is there anybody in here who does not identify with the jaywalker? Okay. Now let's go on page 39. In the paragraph before, we have the guy who is very, very skeptical about what we're saying. You're going to run into him when you do 12-step work. And he says, I've not lost everything in life through drinking, and I certainly do not intend to, thanks to the information. Now, at top of page 39, the first full paragraph, that may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, to smash home upon our alcoholic readers, as it has been revealed to us out of bitter experience. Let us take another illustration. We will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. Now, you see, this goes directly to an extremely important point that we all need to recognize as being active members here and being interested in being helpful to others. And so many people who walk in the door have been exposed to and subjected to the human solutions which emphasize self-knowledge, because of course that's what they're trained to do, and their training may very well be helpful to people who are not about to drink themselves to death. But all it does is get in the way of our program, because it means that it's more difficult in some cases to get the newcomer to understand that they're going to have to chuck all of that and start dealing with their problem on a spiritual plane, or else. This isn't to say that the professionals out there don't do some good. Of course they do. In many cases they're lifesavers for people who have serious mental problems. But when it comes to alcoholism and the disease and the insanity of the next drink, that self-knowledge is useless. And that's something we have to fully understand. It's also clear from this paragraph, as we've been talking about, that there are many people here who are in this class. Their bodies and minds have not been damaged to the extent that they're unable to stop. And they do stop, and they stay stopped, and they hang around. And I keep talking about this not because I'm mad at these people or trying to put them down in any way. It's just that they constitute a real problem that we need to be aware of, and we need to be able to deal with it when it arises with the people we're sponsoring, who are in fact chronic alcoholics. Now let's see what about this guy Fred. We've already read about him being stable, well-adjusted, successful, attractive, promising children of college age, happy home, happily married. Let's go down on page 39. Shortly after what we read before, where it says, yet he is an alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he'd gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. The doctor intimated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. For a few days he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so. In spite of his character and standing, Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problem. We told him what we knew about alcoholism. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms. But he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that his humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. So now we see this specter of self-knowledge coming in, don't we? So what happened was this. Fred got back in the hospital all right, and he had gone to Washington, D.C. on business. And there he got drunk. Let's see what happened to him. Down on page 40 now. Middle of the page. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. I reasoned that I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, that I had been usually successful in licking my other personal problems, and I would therefore be successful where you men failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident, that it would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. In this frame of mind I went about my business for a time. All was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks, and began to wonder if I had not been making too hard work of a simple matter. One day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Physically I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. We don't have one single excuse here for getting drunk. I went to my hotel, leisurely dressed for dinner. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail in my meal, then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner I decided to take a walk. When I returned, it struck me the highball would be fine before going to bed, so I stepped in the bar and had one, had several more, and plenty the next morning, and of course went on a major spree. Next paragraph down on page 41. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. I had commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come. I would drink again. They had said that though I did raise the defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that did happen, and more, for what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. Those strange mental blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. Now let's go to top of page 43.
Jim,
Yes,
can I ask you something?
of course.
You it's interesting, like Jim and Fred's story, I realized that it doesn't say anything in their stories about them being separated from God. That's why they drank. It just says that they had a strange mental twist. It makes me think, like, maybe if my house is in order, and I have done my 10-step and do my 11-step and 12-step, that I can still get that strange mental twist.
Well, sure. There will be blips. There'll be blips, but when you're spiritually fit, they don't amount to anything. What the big book says is, when tempted, you'll recoil from it as from a hot flame. What happens is that people can be so beaten down by life that their spiritual fitness goes all to hell. And if that happens, then there's no protection. Then that strange mental twist will get us for sure. And it happens. But generally speaking, no. We can go and do anything if we're spiritually fit, if we have the proper motives for being there. These two stories, however, don't stand for that proposition at all. Both of them are talking about people who had no spiritual program of action. They had both rejected it. They had not in any way tried to interpose God between themselves and the booze. So they don't stand for the proposition that you're talking about. There is for many people, many recovering people are have a very fragile, sensitive sobriety that requires constant maintenance. I know of 2 people in this room right now who are in that class. Others seem to have a more impervious nature and don't need quite as much. We're all different, but if you are, my sobriety I've always known it was fragile, and that I had no choice but to stay very active. As long as I keep God on my side, it's not fragile at all. I can go and do anything I want to do. But the rule is simple. We stay protected so long as we stay spiritually fit. And we can get disconnected from God in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways that people get disconnected, I know one person in here right now has experienced this recently, that there are medications which we are given that will really make us feel disconnected. And we have to be real careful about that. If we're taking those medications for a good purpose and properly and under supervision, we get through it all right. But if not, it can lead to disaster because it pulls the plug on us spiritually. And Billy, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? And it's a very uncomfortable feeling. A couple of times I've had that happen to me, and in both cases, it was in the hospital that I was given the meds, and I was given some to take home, and I threw them away, even though they were for pain, and I was willing to take over-the-counter stuff for the pain if I needed it. Because I'm not trying to make myself out to be a hero or anything, but I realized that my survival in Alcoholics Anonymous depends upon my staying connected solidly with God. And anything that pulls that plug or even begins to blur the edges makes me start to feel real uncomfortable. And so, but some people seem to be able to tolerate a lot more of that than I can, and a lot of people I know. We are each of us different, and each of us has to gauge the strength of our sobriety ourselves and learn how to deal with it. Staying spiritually fit is the only sure remedy for this, and that means constant vigilance. Stay close to God, because that's where your recovery lies. And some of us have more difficulty doing that than others. Some of us have physical or mental difficulties which could interfere. But nevertheless, in order to stay sober, it's absolutely essential that we do whatever it takes to stay close to God. That's where our recovery lies, nowhere else. and you obviously have more significant problems in doing that than others, but that doesn't mean that the rule is any different for you. It's still the same. Stay close to God and you will stay sober. Okay, does anybody want to pick up a chip today? White, red, blue, or silver? Anybody having an AA birthday in the month of September?
All right.
How many is it? 6? 8 years. 8 years. All right, and there are two things going on tonight. The regular step meeting down at 101, which I do. That's at 7:30, and tonight at 8:30 here, Morris Gibbs of the Bee Gees will be here speaking. So you've pretty much got a choice of a couple of meetings tonight, if that's your mind to go to one. Huh?
There's spaghetti dinner tonight down at
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I went to that one time. They had a bunch of old timers there. They got up, 5 of them got up. Not one of them mentioned God once. So what the hell is this going on here? All right, let's close the meeting then. Next week we'll be looking at the 4th chapter. Let this circle represent the unity of our fellowship. A moment of silence for those who are still suffering. And we'll say the Lord's Prayer together. In our workshop, we don't say anything after we say amen. Thank you. Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you all for being here. Plan to be here next week, same time, same station, God willing, and the creek don't rise.
That's blood pressure, though.
I am so mad at Gary. I was telling these guys. I think I understand the crime of passion where somebody would get so angry with somebody they'd shoot him.
Yeah, okay. Well, you got to figure out how to do it and get away with it. That's the problem.
Oh, I'm such a bastard.
Of course he is. But we already knew that.
Now he has the upper hand.
In this society, you can do anything you constantly.
Boy, did I hear a good speaker last night at the upper room.
Oh, yeah? Who's that?
Glenn from the choral room.
I don't know.
He slept, he was a homeless man. He slept at Bayside in an old police boat.
Oh, really? Ah.
What a marvelous story. What a wonderful man. I really got inspired.
Good.
I cried.
Good.
It was a real good meeting last night.
Upper room has some decent meetings once in a while.
Had some good ice cream too.
Oh, that's right. Last night was ice cream social. Did I tell you got to go get a banana split? Didn't I tell you?
I got
Yeah,
one.
okay.
How are you, Jim?
Good, man. It's good to see
Good
you.
to see you.
How's everything going?
Oh, it's getting a little better.
I'm glad to hear that.
I've just been doing a lot of prayers and everything.
Well, it's
For
about
me,
time that
anyway.
you got back in the saddle. So.
I did a night step here, and I did some in Chicago. So
Good.
I was doing stuff. I just didn't feel very well when I got
Yeah.
back.
Well, you're looking okay now. You got a smile on your face?
Yeah, thank you.
Voice is strong.
I'm just gonna go through the cloud, you know.
10 miles from the beach and lake.
Eventually, I wanna
So I'll be at home at
work with you to find out what next. Like,
10, 11, and 12.
do I go over it with you? or-
Yeah.
I'll
That's
give
what
you
we
a
do.
call.
Doesn't everybody have a big book?
I go on, please.
Yep.